This week on Full Circle Florida, Mr. DeSantis goes to Washington, the governor paying a visit to the nation's capital, asking for federal money from draining the Florida Everglades to building NASA headquarters in the Sunshine State. What's behind the timing? The rise of Byron Donalds, the Fort Myers congressman, now getting a major boost this week from President Donald Trump. Could he be Florida's next governor? Pride on the ice, anger in the stands, Canadians booing the national anthem, Americans booing the Canadian anthem. Is President Trump's rhetoric now spilling onto the rink, or is it all just fun and games? Our panel is here. And what's in your water? The fight over fluoride and the politics now pouring right out of your faucet. Welcome to Full Circle Florida, and we begin this week with the house cleaning in Tallahassee. Ever since the Trump administration poached Florida's top politicians to serve in the White House, it's created a chain reaction of decisions for the Florida governor. Our Capitol reporter Forrest Saunders on the moving parts and the man who's now Florida's new top cop.
With one hand on a Bible, the other in the air.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
James Uthmeier formally became Florida's 39th Attorney General on Monday after getting the tap from his former boss, Governor Ron DeSantis. In a brief speech, Uthmeier vowed to punish criminals, protect the innocent, back law enforcement, and target cartels, gangs, and human traffickers.
I promise to you and the people of Florida that I will endeavor every day to do what is right and to levy justice where it is due. No empty rhetoric, no posturing, no excuses.
Before his ascent, Uthmeier was DeSantis' chief of staff, his 2024 presidential campaign manager, and served as the EOG's general counsel. Among Republicans, he's getting rave reviews. A state GOP chair expects Uthmeier will work hand in hand with the governor, especially on immigration.
He knows, like I know, it was one of the most important issues facing Florida voters in this election. It's why we won Florida big. He's going to play a big role in that. You heard him say it in his speech, and I think he's going to be ready to take on that immigration and the cartels ready now as Attorney General.
State Senator Blaise Ingoglia, who's in the mix to succeed state CFO Jimmy Patronis, thinks Uthmeier will be a legal force to be reckoned with. That's after having helped DeSantis stretch the limits of his power.
James Uthmeier, as Attorney General, is going to be aggressive as he needs to be in order to keep this state safe, but we still have a Supreme Court, we still have the court system. But I will also say that there have been a lot of things that have happened over the years that the governor and now AG Uthmeier have been advocating for that have been upheld in the courts. Where everyone thought they were wrong, they turned out to be right.
For Democrats concerned, State Rep Anna Eskamani hitting Uthmeier for his role aiding Florida's migrant flight program and recent fight to nix those 2024 weed and abortion ballot initiatives. Quote, this is a guy who specializes in weaponizing government and abusing law enforcement powers, from kidnapping Venezuelan asylum seekers in Texas to threatening TV stations with criminal prosecutions for playing ads he doesn't like.
Administrations for generations past have fought to defend state laws and oppose amendments that we believe are going to hurt our way of life here in Florida.
Chief of Staff Uthmeier spoke to us in October about the amendments. He defended the use of tax dollars and warning letters to TV stations. They threatened criminal penalties if stations continued airing supportive ads the administration considered false and misleading.
The letters that were sent out were cautioning stations that you have dishonest material that's being disseminated on the state's health department does, again, have a duty to protect people from misinformation that could endanger women, that could, mislead them into thinking something's not available to them that is.
Chair of the Florida Democrats, Nikki Fried, has told us previously the effort to kill the ballot initiatives was, quote, bull and unconstitutional. She now worries what Uthmeier as AG will mean for Florida.
Now Ron DeSantis is going to appoint his never elected, never public service chief of staff, who is more of a cronyism for Ron DeSantis. And now he will have not only the U.S. Senate pick, 2 members of the Florida cabinet. So he has been completely taken over the executive branch, and it is going to be something that is going to hurt the people of our state.
And Forrest joining us right now from Tallahassee. Forrest, Mr. DeSantis went to Washington this week with a long wish list, from building the headquarters of NASA in Florida to getting federal funds for projects like Lake Okeechobee and filtrating some of that water south to help drain it. It's interesting how when there's a Republican in the White House, the tone changes.
Yeah, it really is. And especially when you consider what DeSantis has gotten a lot of criticism for over the last few years, which is he took a lot of that federal COVID money, as well as some of the stuff from the infrastructure bill that was passed under the Biden administration, and he spread it around the state for either infrastructure improvement projects or through the Job Growth Grant Fund. And those were things that Democrats constantly hit him for, basically federal dollars that were inflating our budget and then used to improve the state of Florida, whether through infrastructure or through other programs. And that was all federal money that was coming from the Biden administration, but Biden never got a shout out for that, and you can imagine why. And so, yeah, now the tables have turned. DeSantis heading up to D.C., hoping to get a little bit of that money for Florida as we move forward. But you got to remember, the state of Florida is in pretty good financial shape right now. We've got a large surplus. In fact, we've almost maxed out our rainy day fund. We're paying down debt. So it might be a tough sell, but you've also seen DeSantis sort of ingratiate himself with President Trump again.
Well, yeah, it does pay to be close to the guy in power. Meanwhile, the Democrats at the state level sort of going against the narrative that they've been pushing, which is let's all focus on strictly cost of living issues that continue to really impact people in the state of Florida, from the condo crisis to rising insurance premiums and everything in between. And they introduced a bill this week that would repeal the 6-week abortion ban that's been in place in Florida since last year. And I'm curious why they think, A, this is a wise use of time. The Republicans have a supermajority. This thing is dead on arrival. Why don't they concentrate as a party on recruiting new talent to win future elections so that they can be more relevant in Tallahassee? And why don't they actually introduce a bill that says, in the future, if something gets a 50% majority or 51% majority as a referendum, that it can actually pass?
What I'm hearing is that legislation is in the works, but again, you still have the problem of getting through the GOP supermajorities in both chambers. I mean, if you do want to reduce that threshold, it would first need to get through the chambers, and then it would appear on the ballot. And ironically, you would need a 60% supermajority of voters to reduce it back down to 50%. So, I mean, that's something they could do. I think long short of the sort of abortion repeal this was an opportunity for Democrats to take a dig at Republicans and say, hey, we still had a majority of Floridians who wanted this repeal, despite the fact it didn't pass. So they're going to take an effort to, jab them in the back with this and just see if it can get some kind of traction.
Forrest Saunders in Tallahassee. Forrest, thank you. Next on Full Circle Florida, what's in your water? The fluoride fight comes home. Welcome back to Full Circle Florida. For decades, cities and counties have been adding fluoride to your drinking water to prevent cavities. But now the practice is suddenly a hot political topic, with some claiming the mineral is linked to lower IQs in children. This week, I spoke with Hillsborough County Commissioner Harry Cohen about the county's recent decision to keep it and where this debate is headed next. Have you seen any evidence that has assuaged you to at least be open to the idea that fluoride is in any way a danger to the public's health? Or have you seen quite the contrary, that it has been helpful, particularly for children?
What I've seen is that if you have a study that shows that fluoride in much larger amounts than we put into the water can indeed be harmful. But at the amounts that we put it in, which is the amount that is recommended by the American Dental Association and also by the federal government, if we put it in at that level, there is no evidence to show that it is detrimental to health. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that it's extremely helpful in preventing cavities and dental issues that can contribute to health problems, both in children and in adults.
Meanwhile, this debate is playing out in other counties and other cities all throughout the state of Florida, the Tampa Bay area, and even throughout the country because of this sort of quasi-political debate, I think, that's intersecting with this issue. How do you see this playing out? Do you think it's going to end up being a patchwork of, depending on where you live, you'll have fluoride, you won't have fluoride? Is that kind of where we're headed with this?
It might be, and that's certainly a possibility. It's also a possibility, I've heard, that the state legislature is going to take it up and that it's going to be debated this session in Tallahassee, and that it's possible that there will be a statewide action taken. I would certainly suggest that people that are interested in keeping fluoride in the water pay very close attention to that debate and make sure that they make their voices heard to their legislators. But in the meantime, it will be handled at the local level. That is where drinking water is dispensed. And it may very well be that in different places you'll have different standards.
Well, as they say, all politics is local, and in this case, it's right out of your faucet. You guys were the decision makers on this. Commissioner Harry Cohen, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Next on Full Circle Florida, pride and prejudice on the ice and America's relationship with Canada on thin ice. Okay, time for the Full Circle panel this week. She is the publisher of Southeast Politics, Janelle Irwin-Taylor, a returning guest joining us this week, and our political analyst, Dr. Susan McManus. All right, we start in Florida, the steady rise of Republican Congressman Byron Donalds from Southwest Florida, Fort Myers. He's been on all these talk shows from Bill Maher to Fox News. You see him all over the time on the national stage. President Trump essentially endorsing him for the governor's race. Your thoughts on this? Is he big-time talent? It could be the future. Could he be the next governor?
Well, it's a very clever move by the president to lock in early on who he wants to see. And you are right. He is on every news outlet that's watched by MAGA people almost every day. And what it does is it really puts pressure on some of the others that had quietly been talking to people about raising money for them and running and so forth. Wilton Simpson, for example. It may very well chase him to run for re-election for the ag commissioner, rather tackle a very popular person with Republicans endorsed by a very popular Republican president.
Do you think it also underscores the strain between Governor DeSantis and Donald Trump? Is DeSantis still on the outside looking in on MAGA?
Totally. I mean, I think that's not much in dispute at this point. Donald Trump has a long memory, and he doesn't like it when people aren't loyal to him. And even though Governor DeSantis, has made a lot of inroads with, trying to repair that relationship, and he's doing his immigration bidding per se, he still ran for president against him and said some bad things about him. So now they're talking about, Casey DeSantis, his wife, potentially running. So yes, absolutely, this is a snub. And not good news for Casey DeSantis. I will say.
Overshadow
it was
her.
Donald Trump who got her husband elected the first time around, let's not forget.
But she did come out tops in a poll done this week by the University of North Florida. The bottom line is, it's really, really early.
Yeah.
And it's over a year and a half, and who knows?
This was one of those weeks where politics intersected with sports. If you watched hockey, Canadians in the stands booing the national anthem, Americans booing the Canadian anthem. President Trump's rhetoric on Canada, is that becoming a credibility threat for his presidency? Anyone want to take that?
I mean, I think that the booing is unfortunate on both sides of the booing. Nobody should boo each other during national anthems. It's just insanely disrespectful. But this is, I think, a symptom of a broader problem. And what we're seeing is, Donald Trump and his administration seems to be alienating a lot of our allies with this talk about, Canada is the 51st state, acquiring Greenland, the Panama Canal, J.D. Vance's comments in Europe, kind of leaning into this far-right ideology. It's really alienating a lot of our allies, and it's making us question, our fundamental international policy.
If we're antagonizing everyone, can we be a friend to anyone? I mean, is this a problem?
Well, it's certainly one that's talked about a lot, but going back to the Canada thing, I had a very interesting conversation this week with a Canadian, and she makes a very interesting point, which we don't hear here so much. She says that going through the 51st state idea, which we all think is really, but she says back home there's a split, and that the Canadians have a big, deep political divide, just like we do, and people who like Trump say, yeah, we'd love to be the 51st state, and the others say, heck no, we don't want any part of it.
Trudeau's on his way out, right? I mean, he's the lame duck leader there. All right, well, meanwhile, an interesting read in the New Republic this week. The headline, Americans heading for the exits. And I know people roll their eyes when they hear this, but I don't think this is actually anti-Trumpers. I think it's people that are just disaffected with the political system here and where America is in its culture right now with the division. I quote the article here, Ireland's Department of Foreign Affairs, they've seen a 50% increase in the number of Americans seeking Irish passports. Is this a concern when it comes to a brain drain in America?
Well, first of all, getting a passport for another country doesn't mean that you're just giving up your American citizenship and moving over there. So that has to be clarified first. And it depends on who is moving. Seriously. I mean, a brain drain, depending on who it is, perhaps. But when you look at a 50% increase, is it going from 50 to 100 who are asking for passport, or thousands going to 2,000s?
And this is something that, you know, there's a whole cottage industry that is kind of propped up with the re-election of Donald Trump to a second term.
Right.
And that is like long-term vacationing. People who were disaffected by his election are looking at opportunities to go and kind of just get out of Dodge for 4 years. But what I will say is the types of people who are going to be doing that, these are people who are affluent, they've got the money to do it. Most average citizens can't just run off to another country because they don't like what's going on in their own country. Correct. It's a very difficult thing to expatriate to another country. So I don't think that this is going to be some earth-shattering trend that moves the needle in any substantial way.
President Trump called Zelensky a dictator, said they started the war. Anyone buying that? Does that come off as credible when you say things like that?
No, it really does not, and that's what is causing consternation among a lot of people. Why did he say that? But the reason that he's able to shift his opinions about what's happening in Ukraine is pure and simple money. Americans are well aware, and it was in the last election, that almost $500 billion had been spent by the U.S. in Ukraine, and a lot of people are looking at this. Is this going to be another Vietnam? Are we getting anything out of this? So it enables him to change positions slightly, but it's confusing to a lot of people.
You don't think Rubio's cringing right now when he says that? Doesn't it make Rubio's job harder when the president does that?
I think what we're seeing among people at the highest echelons of power in the United States is, and who are allies of the president, is that they're assuming that this is part of a larger game plan. Trump is known for being a businessman, a negotiator, a strategist. So is this a way for him to kind of soften Vladimir Putin to get a deal that works this conflict out? That's, I think, what folks on the right are hoping for. Now, those on the left are like, you gotta, when this man says he's gonna do something, he's gonna do it, you better believe him. So.
All right, I got 20 seconds left. I saw this week Democrats dying on the hills that they're willing to die on. The example in Florida, the Democrats, introducing a bill to repeal Florida's abortion ban, and in New York, the governor Hochul suing the Trump administration after it killed the toll program that was charging drivers $9 a day to get into Manhattan. You know, help me. Is that a hill worth dying on?
Certainly not the fee to drive into New York City. But in terms of the reproductive rights issue in Florida, the only recourse to keep the issue alive is really to introduce it as a bill before the Florida legislature.
We'll talk about this next in our final thoughts, because I have an idea about that. Stay with us. Our final thoughts on the week that was and the week ahead next. Still have more to talk about. Stick around. Welcome back to Full Circle Florida. Okay, final thoughts and what you're paying attention to this week and next week. But I just to kind of button up what we were talking about before with the Democrats, why don't they introduce a bill that would make the referendum 51% in order to pass, rather than something they know is dead on arrival?
Because it would never pass.
They would never pass.
They would still
take
need
60%.
Yeah,
that's the irony of it, right?
All
right, so what are you left with this week? What are you looking forward to next week?
I am going to be watching the polls because I would like to see whether or not Donald Trump's kind of endorsement of Byron Donalds shifts the needle at all in gubernatorial race polls ahead of 2026. See if some of those positive numbers for Casey DeSantis come down, he goes up a little bit. That'll be something to watch for, I think.
Drama continues.
So much drama.
I'm watching foreign policy, both Israel and also Ukraine, and I just can't help but say I worry. Please, no more plane crashes.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. I mean, there was a kind of a poll that came out that said people's confidence and how safe it's gone down. I mean, relatively speaking, I mean, not relatively, it is factually safer to fly than it is to drive. But at this rate, it's not a good look. I'm supposed to go to Alaska in this summer, and I'd be lying if I didn't say,
I'm supposed to be putting my kid on a plane in 6 weeks. I'm not happy about it.
There's a bigger discussion there with the FAA and what's going, and we'll have that perhaps next week. Thank you both for stopping by as always. Appreciate your thoughts and helping me sort through all of this. And thank you for watching us here on Full Circle Florida. Join us again next week, and make sure to add our free 24/7 streaming news channel, ABC Action News Plus. Have a great week.